Hey besties, welcome back to Two Besties, One Brain Cell. I'm your host Cara, and today I'm joined again by Michelle.
Hello everyone.
AKA GucciPaints, for those who don't already know. So last time I had Michelle on the podcast, we kind of touched on the topic of parents and like how your perspective and your relationship with them evolves as you get older. And a few people were interested in hearing us talk about that a little bit more. So that's what our episode today is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're going to dissect it.
Yeah. So we actually asked for questions from listeners just to see what you guys would like us to cover. And we did get some really good questions, so we'll dive into those. But before we start, I just wanted to give a bit of a disclaimer. Neither of us are experts on the topic by any means. We're not qualified. We're not therapists. No. Definitely not trauma therapists. So
absolutely not. This is literally just speaking from experience.
Yeah.
And how we're still trying to navigate this whole situation with parents and whatnot. Like, I'm definitely not an expert, that's for sure. I'm still trying to figure out my shit, basically.
Yeah, same. In a way, I feel like I'm probably like the least qualified person to give advice on this because
we're off to a good start.
Yeah, great. Everyone just stops listening now. Just for a little bit of background, I'm obviously white.
Are you?
Yeah. So a lot of the questions we got were regarding like ethnic parents, and because I think that's a huge thing for a lot of people that listen, or like just a lot of people
relate to it, I guess.
Yeah. But my dad is Italian and my mum is Australian, but I grew up with just my mum. We've had a pretty tumultuous relationship over the years. There's been a lot of tension, very turbulent, and it still is. It's not like I'm like sitting here being like, all right, this is how I turn that into a perfect relationship, because it's definitely not. But I think I can definitely, speak on some of my experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what about you?
So I am Vietnamese. Both my parents were born in Vietnam, except we speak Vietnamese, Chinese. So I don't know if anybody else would relate to that. But yeah, in Vietnam, there's heaps of people that speak Chinese.
Yeah. So
we're like kind of half-half, I guess. But I have a funny relationship with my parents, and so that's why I kind of resonate with some of these questions and topics quite a bit. My parents and I went through I had a really strange upbringing. Like, there was just like this 10-year gap where just so much happened, like so jam-packed. And then I'm in the phase where my parents don't know, like, say a traditional family would say, go to therapy, figure it out, and how to move past that phase of our life, whereas my parents are in the phase where they're just trying to act like nothing happened.
Oh my god, that's so common. I always hear people be like, just go to like family therapy, but I think if you're dealing with people who
don't even know,
they don't even realize that what they've done is wrong, and they don't realize that there's an issue on their end, like they're not willing to do that.
I kind of completely understand that because like when you grow up in Vietnam, like, what the fuck is therapy? Do you know what I mean? Like, to them, they probably don't even have therapists there. Probably now they do.
Yeah.
But what the hell is a therapist?
Well, they probably also think it's for, like, if you're really, like, mentally ill or something, not just to work through everyday problems.
Yeah. There's still such a big stigma around it.
Yeah.
But that is basically a quick synopsis of my family life. Mm-hmm. Crazy 10 years where it was just so tumultuous and just...
Was that during your teen years?
Yes. Yeah. So it was literally the moment I left primary school up until like my early 20s. It was just such an uncomfortable like phase. It probably started much earlier on, actually. I reckon it would have started by the time I was like year 4 or 5 and like going way beyond high school.
I feel like it's when you start showing signs of like your own personality, like you start becoming your own person. That's when they start to freak out, because they're like, oh shit, like this is no longer like my child that I am controlling like every part of their life. They're starting to have their own, needs and their own wants and their own personality and views and opinions and all 100%. That. And they're just like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah. And sometimes it's really bad. I don't think this is the best way to put it, but maybe someone will relate to this. But sometimes I'm like, I feel like a part of me still feels like they put me through that shit and they should feel bad.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can you possibly just pretend like nothing happened? It's like shit that no one should have gone through, but I went through, and I feel like it was their fault. But obviously they were, like I said in the last podcast, like my parents aren't perfect.
Yeah. Like they were doing the best they could with what the tools that they had at the time. Yeah.
And I do still recognize that some of the stuff they did, like they were being very selfish, but then it didn't mean that they didn't love me any less, or they loved me any less. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
but
they just didn't know how to show it.
They just put
a hole through the wall. Yeah.
I think they just made really bad choices as adults.
Yeah.
Which ultimately affected me. And no matter how much love you give to someone, if you've done them wrong, like, it's still going to impact them.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't fix
100%.
that by loving someone and buying them stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just really going on a tangent now about my life, but
that's so relatable. I'm like, oh my God, I totally feel this as well. Like, I feel like, they show love in the way that they think, like, the way they think they should, but that might not be a way that was, like, meeting our needs.
Yeah,
and
100%.
especially when you're younger, you don't realize that was them showing love, so you don't necessarily, like, feel it. Like, you don't realize that, like, they do really love you, they do really care about you. You just feel like my needs aren't being met, and it's tough
100%.
as you're going through it. I think, like, in hindsight, you can look back and appreciate, like, the things they did for you a lot more. But
for sure, like, definitely, like, my mum especially really tried to keep the family together.
Do you have siblings?
No, I'm the only child. That's
same.
another. That's another issue.
Yes, I feel like an only child
issue.
dynamic is, like, okay, for me especially, like, growing up with just me and my mum, like, I feel like single parent, single child is the worst possible dynamic.
It's heavy, don't you think? It's a heavy dynamic,
and
especially
there's no one to break it up.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like I can sort of relate to this in a sense. Like, I think my dad was out of, like, I'm not going to divulge too much of my personal, like, I will, like, kind of skim over it, but basically for that 10-year period, basically I would say my mum was, like, a single parent.
Yeah, yeah.
And my dad didn't come back into the picture until much later on. But even in that 10-year gap, like, it's just so heavy because, like, I feel like you're carrying the weight. You're helping them carry the weight.
Yeah.
But as a child, I'm not sure if that's the most healthy thing.
It's definitely not, yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think, it's just heavy. That's the best way I can describe that phase of my life. Very heavy.
Yeah. Yeah,
still is sometimes.
This is, like, giving me flashbacks to my own life.
PTSD.
Yes. Well, I guess,
like, now that we've
given a bit of background
about us, we can start answering the questions.
Yeah, we'll jump into some questions. I feel like this podcast is going to be a bit all over the place because a lot of these things are really, like, interconnected, and it's really easy to go off on tangents, but we'll do our best to kind of cover everything. So I guess we'll start off with how to set boundaries with parents who try to control your career choice. I think this is something that I feel like pretty much every ethnic kid has experienced.
Absolutely.
From my experience. Yeah. I think we touched on this a little bit in the selective schools episode with Cindy and Izza. Just growing up with, I think we were talking more about growing up around other kids or like academic pressure to do certain things. But I think a lot of that definitely comes from the parents. So did your parents try to control your career choice when you were growing up?
I think money was the most important thing to my parents. And so they didn't care what the job was going to be. They were just like, you just need to make money.
Yeah.
But as time passed, like, I think they really realized that I was more interested in, like, creative, like, jobs. And so I think they let that go. So then it just became more of the pressure of just get a degree.
Just get a degree.
It just didn't matter what it was. So I think I was very lucky in that sense. There were never the top 4, like, careers that I had to have. And I know almost everyone around me, their parents have put that pressure on them at some point. My parents never really did that. I think there's just a lot of pressure of being able to be financially secure and just getting a degree. Yeah.
I think that comes from a place of them genuinely caring about you, right? Like, they want you to do well. They don't want you to struggle, especially if they've come from
100%,
struggle themselves.
Completely get it.
Yeah. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, like, when you're dealing with that it is a way of them showing that they care for your future. But at the same time, there is a point where it does become toxic if they're not letting you do what you genuinely really want to do with your life.
Yeah. 100%. And don't you agree, like, when you talk to, I think we're in a position where we do a lot of freelance and you speak to a lot of clients and I feel like consistently, like, the same story will come up. I did this because my parents, like, really wanted me to do the degree. I finished it. I hated it. And now I'm doing
something totally different.
Completely different.
Yes, all the time.
That is the same story I hear every time. And that's why I think it's so important to talk about it because, like, in the moment when you're in your early 20s or you're fresh out of high school, you think that is it.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show you every time what you want to do will win.
Yeah, it will. Like
Every single time.
no matter how badly like you want to like respect your parents' wishes and please them, like at the end of the day you have like it's your life. Like you have to do what you want to do, or you're just going to be miserable and you'll end up resenting them for it. I think it's a really like 100%. Really big thing.
I think like I think so setting boundaries, like I think like with, I don't know if this is really, I'll just speak on it in terms of like ethnic parents, but like there's this really deep rooted like value of respecting parents. I'm sure that's in any culture, but I think with Asian culture in particular, it's like your parents are always right. Yeah. Always right, no matter what. And I feel like whereas say in like a very traditional or like modern Aussie family, like you go back and forth, like discussion. There's a lot of discussion. Whereas with Asian families, it's like, it's this way and that's it, that's the right way. And so I feel like with boundaries, it's learning to communicate and being open about what you truly want.
Yeah. And I think touching on that, obviously, like I fully acknowledge the fact that like I'm white and obviously I can't fully understand. But I think your parents might surprise you. Like for them, it might not come naturally to talk about things or to, you know, to communicate. But if you take the first step and actually talk to them, tell them how you're feeling and like do it respectfully, like they might surprise you with their ability to, or to actually want to listen and, you know.
And I also want to say that like boundaries with parents isn't going to be easy. Like in any way, shape or form. You might, I don't know. I feel like even if you decide to tell your parents, I don't want to become a doctor anymore. I just want to do fine arts. Like you have to prepare yourself for the fact that you might not be talking to your parents for another year.
Yeah, there might be some blowout.
That's the truth, right? I don't think setting boundaries is going to be an easy thing, and I don't want to sit here and be like, yeah, just communicate. Because
just sit down at dinner and have a little chat with them.
Chat, bit of red wine. It doesn't work like that at all.
Yeah, but start off bringing it up respectfully. You can't just, well, you can if you want, but I wouldn't go in just like raising hell to begin with.
No way.
But if they aren't receptive to that, I think then sometimes you do just kind of have to raise hell.
But ultimately, like, I think if you're doing something you love and you're happy, isn't that what all parents want for their children, to be happy? And I think maybe in the short term, that vision can't be seen by them. But I think when you start living your life and creating the life that you want and you're so happy and you're fulfilled, like, I mean, I don't know what parent would ever resent their child for that.
Yeah, like, I feel like they eventually come around to accept it when they see that it turned out alright.
Yeah, and if they do resent their child for that, like, to be honest with you, I know we say, like, parents are, like, the holy grail or whatever, but it's like, do you really want to be around someone like that? At the end of the day, like, your parent's just another person, right? Yeah. And yes, they raised you, yes, this, but, like, isn't that toxic?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. If they're not respecting you and your wishes, like, at a certain point you have to realise that just because they're your parent doesn't mean that you have to... do everything they want, respect everything they want if they're not respecting you. Yeah,
and
we're both humans. Yeah,
but we've been raised to think that no matter what, even if they're disrespecting your wishes, that it's okay because it's your parents, but it's not true. Yeah. Like, it's not true at all. And I'm not a professional, but I know that is a fact.
Yeah, 100%. It's so toxic.
Yeah, it's toxic as hell.
Yeah, and it will make you miserable. I can confirm that.
Yeah, so ultimately just do whatever the hell it is that you want. And if you're happy... your parents will come through at some point. But I just think, like, pushing yourself to study for 5-6 years, doing something that you don't even freaking love, like, it's a fucking waste of money, waste of time. It's so taxing on your mental health. And it's just, like, it's just wasting everybody's time because at the end of the day, whether you're 25, 30, 35, 40, you're going to leave that job. It doesn't matter what anyone tells you. You're going to be so miserable. You're going to leave the job, 100%.
100%.
All right.
So I guess that kind of ties into the next question, which is how do you distance yourself from the guilt of living your own life when you know your parents have sacrificed so much for you and lived their lives for you, although you don't ask them to?
I've seen this on TikTok a lot. Have you seen those videos?
No.
Oh, I've seen so many of these.
For you?
Yeah, for me. I'm like, I don't feel any guilt.
Well, this is something that I've like really, really struggled with, and I think I'm still not fully, like, I have not fully learned to deal with the guilt. It definitely gets the better of me sometimes. It's hard. Like, I think like a really important thing is to acknowledge to your parents that you do, like, you've seen the sacrifice that they made and that you do appreciate it, because at the end of the day, like they're humans, right? And we all want to, like, to feel like what we've done is appreciated and valued. So I think it's important to express that to them. Like, you, like, don't just go off on your own path.
You got to show them that you appreciate them, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Like, you can't just go off on your own path and be like, fuck you, mum and dad. Like, I'm living my own life. Like, I feel like you... Like,
but I feel like... Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go on.
I was going to say, like, if they feel the guilt, I'm sure they... I don't really know how to answer this question. Sorry, maybe you just keep going. Whatever you're saying. I'm trying to dissect the question.
Yeah. I think it's like... I feel like this question is like someone who's gone past the next step of the first question. So, like, they've maybe made their own choice. And now they're just trying to live with it. Like, maybe their parents weren't happy with it.
Because, like, I'm going to answer it from someone that's, like, very, like, savage. Like, not a savage, but, like, very... I don't feel guilt. So, like, I feel like if your parents ever made you feel guilty, or, like, you make yourself feel guilty, it's like dangling what they've done for you over your head.
Yeah.
As, like, I did this for you. Like, you should be grateful. Whatever.
Which is literally what you're signing up for when you have kids.
So
right? You can't hold it over their head like, oh, I put a roof over your head. Like, I fed you for 20 years. Like, okay, yeah. Like, I didn't ask to be born. And now you're going to hold, like,
that over
the basic
my head.
Care that you gave me as a child over my head.
I'm trying to dissect whether this person has parents that make them feel guilty for all that they've done, which is wrong. Your parents should never do that. Like, nothing should, like, everything should be, like, unconditional. As in, like, does that make sense? As in, your parents shouldn't do things so that they get praise or rewarded in return.
Yeah.
Like, your parents should do it out of love and...
Well, because they're caring for their child.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So then that's why you shouldn't feel guilt, because everything your parents did for you was out of love. I'm hoping that's the case.
Yeah.
And so they want you to live your best life. Like, you should never feel bad for what they had to do to get you to where you are now, because I think them watching you live your life, your best life, is the most rewarding thing that you could give them. I feel like it would be so miserable for them to sacrifice their life and work in a factory like for 30 years on minimum wage for you to go and fucking do meth on the streets. Do you know what I mean? Like, as in, like, I think that's probably a bit of an extreme comparison, but, like, as long as you're happy, healthy, got a roof over your head, like, I think you should feel no guilt.
Yeah, I think like, the conflict kind of arises when their image of you living your best life, or what they think your best life should be, doesn't align with, like, your image. So, like, say, like, for both of us, we wanted to follow, like, creative careers, and maybe our parents think that that's not going to be, what's the word? Like, not going to be successful, that we're not going to make money, that it's going to be really difficult and we might struggle. Whereas they might think, like, if you become a doctor, like, you're not going to struggle, so therefore you'll be living your best life then. But I think if you can just show them... Oh, now I feel like I'm answering the first question again.
And we've circled back.
No, but I just think, like, it's just that initial period of, like, them having difficulty accepting it. And then once you can show them that, like, you're happy and you're healthy and things are going well, then, like, they eventually come around, and you shouldn't have to feel guilty for that. But it is really hard. Like, I fully acknowledge that, because I struggle with that too. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like we did not give any
I didn't know if I really answered, but I don't
advice.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard because I sound like a fucking terror child. Like, yeah, I don't know.
It's funny that you say that, because I reckon I was probably more of a terror than you.
No, I don't know about that. I feel like I'm still a bit of a terror, and I'm like fucking 26. But I think, like, I just need to move out of home. That's a whole other topic for another day. Anyway.
Okay, well,
next question.
Yeah, sorry if we didn't answer that very well. I don't know how to answer that.
I don't know how to answer that either.
I feel like I have this bit of hair that's just sticking out on the side. Sorry. Anyway, all right. How would you work around overly stubborn or strict parents, for example, not allowing you to have any privacy or independence?
Oh, that's a good one.
I used to fight with my mum about this all the time growing up. Yeah. There was one point where she, like, found all my social media. Actually, this has happened twice now. So first it was, like, back when I was 15, like, in the Tumblr days, spilling my whole life on the internet. You know, to be fair, like, I was probably a bit young to be doing that. Yeah. But like I felt like my privacy had been invaded, but then her argument was like, but you're putting it out there like in public. So yeah, and then later on, like when I was in my early 20s, she found like my Twitter and my Instagram, and like she found your Twitter. She had a fucking meltdown.
I'm dying.
But you know what's funny is like the things that she like would get, like that she was really upset about me posting, were like not the things that like I think I shouldn't have posted. Like the ones that she got upset about, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like it was just, like probably just oversharing a little bit, but like I would still probably tweet it today. But like
you would tweet anything.
I have some boundaries. But then like things that were probably like things that I should have been more careful about putting out onto the internet, you know, in terms of like future career and like all that type of thing. She wasn't worried about those. But she was just worried about like me oversharing like personal stuff. But yeah, anyway, so I obviously felt like my privacy had been like very much invaded, and she was just very overbearing. And it is really hard, but I think this is like one of the situations, if your parents are being really controlling or they're not letting you have any independence, you just have to like prove a point. Like you just have to show them that you can be independent.
Yeah. And overbearing parents, strict parents, like I always think the case of why they're like that is because they fear the unknown. And we were just talking about this earlier. Like literally that is all it is. And I've realized that over the years, like back then I was not allowed to go out. I wasn't even allowed to catch the school bus to school. God. Like literally the school bus with only girls from my school.
Oh, wow.
Taking you from one place to the drop-off zone, which was literally in front of my house. I was very lucky. I was not even allowed to do that. But then the second I did it once, I got to do it for the rest of like the 3 years that I was at the school.
Yeah, you just
like,
have to break the barrier.
Yes,
yeah.
That's the only way. And I completely understand because I know a few friends that are... Because you're going to have two camps. You're going to have the camp where you have people that are really scared to disrespect their parents. And then you've got the people like shitheads like me who are fucking terrorists and always looking to push it. I don't like argue heavily with my parents. Like I don't like scream and stuff like that to get my way. I always just like test the waters and I push it. For example, like when I started going, like I finished school already at that point and I started going like clubbing, but I would come home before 12, but she would...
That's such an early clubbing night.
That's like... And then at some point, eventually, that was the time that I would leave for the club. Yeah. So it's funny how it changes. But at that point, like me coming home even before 12, my mum would be calling me at 9 p.m. checking when I was coming home.
Where are you?
So every half an hour, 9 p.m., 9:30, 10, 10:30, so on. And then at some point, I stopped picking up the calls and then I would come home at 10. The next time I would come home at 11. Next time I would come home at 12. And I would just ignore the calls because they're just scared that you're going to die.
Yeah.
Something's
it comes
from
a place of like they're being overprotective. Like
totally.
Especially for girls, I think.
Yes, for sure.
It's warranted.
It's very heightened.
Yeah.
Yeah. But each time I come home alive, maybe a little bit drunk, but I'm alive. So it's totally fine. And I've never like... I have been kind of scared in those moments, like to push it a little bit, but every time you push it, it just gets easier. And I've learned to kind of apply that to everything that I do.
Yeah.
And like when I've been in relationships, like I've just pushed it. And yeah, I feel like you just kind of have
to... With your parents or with your partner?
No, sorry, that was very confusing. With my parents, like hanging out with my partner.
Like not
staying
being allowed
over.
to,
Yeah, so you just have to push it. Again, I just think like all that stuff about parents being strict, I think it's just their fear of not knowing what's going to happen to you or what's going to happen to their life or like just life in general. I don't know how to explain it. Like as in, you know what I mean?
Well, because you're going through this point too. Like I don't know how old the people that ask these questions are because I think a lot of these things kind of tend to pop up around the time you're finishing high school, entering uni, like maybe your early 20s. And like if you think about it, like for them, like you have to remind yourself they've literally raised you since you were a baby. Like you were their like vulnerable little baby at one point and they've watched you grow, you know, become a child into a teenager. And I think it's just really hard for them to just wrap their heads around the fact that you're now an adult that's going to start doing adult things. Like, because there's no like cutoff point when you become an adult
at all,
or like when you stop being a child. Like
it's that transition. I think it's such an awkward transition. There's no line, there's no this or that. It's just like... And I think when you hit that transition phase, that's when you have to really start pushing it.
Yeah. And don't leave it too long. Like, just start early.
Start early. Start as soon as you leave high school.
Yeah. Make it easier on yourself.
We're the worst. Parents are listening to this like, what the fuck?
This is a parenting advice podcast.
But seriously, like, I think it's up to you to guide them into the transition to your adulthood.
Yeah.
They're never going to see you as an adult because you're always going to be their baby.
Yeah, you have to show them that you're an adult. Yeah.
You have to show them.
Yeah.
100%. But don't push it so hard. It's all about like baby steps. I think you're going to have a hard time transitioning from like never leaving your house to going clubbing until 4 a.m.
Yeah.
You want to do it hour by hour.
Hour by hour. Just go clubbing every single week so you can just push it out a little bit longer each time.
I love how like my only core memory is like clubbing.
Which club?
Which club?
Scarlet?
So it started at Alhambra. So I remember my mum used to call me at Alhambra at
Yeah.
like 10, 11, 12. Like, where are you? I'm like, I'm coming home.
You're like, I'm on my way.
I'm on
You're
my
like
way.
dancing on the podium. Yeah, but I think like you do have to push it. Like your parents are never going to be the ones to turn around and be like, all right, do whatever you want now. You like, they just have to see you starting to do things independently, and then they'll realize that, oh, they actually can.
Yeah,
and then
100%.
they start to ease up a little bit. Another thing that I think really helps with that, this is pretty extreme, but moving out. Like,
Yeah, because it says privacy or independence. And it comes to a point where like you just have to take yourself out of the situation, right? I think if your parents are kind of like super overbearing and you think they're never going to change, and that's the fact, like our parents are like grown adults, like mature adults. Like there's a chance they may never change.
yeah, they're set in their ways.
And
like,
I feel like with our generation or whatever, and the generations after us, everyone's so like self-aware and so like, what's the word, like self-reflective. Is there another word for that? When you're very like...
I know what you're trying to say.
That word, there's a word for it. Put it here.
One brain cell.
Literally.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're starting to become really aware of our life and how we can change it. But
Like breaking the cycles.
Yeah. Whereas our parents, the truth is they're probably never going to change. So if you really are having a hard time dealing with the situation and the dynamic of your family life, I feel like it comes to a stage where, kind of like me, where I'm at now, I've kind of accepted what my parents will be and who they are, and I don't think they're going to change. So it's time for me to take myself out of the situation. But obviously if you're like 18 and you just have like, you're working at KFC, like it's going to be hard to move out.
Oh yeah, like don't do it before you're like ready to. I think
sure.
it also like, it depends on how bad the situation is at home. If it's like so toxic that it's really destroying your mental health, then it just hits a point where like you just can't be in that environment. I think
if there's a will, there's a way. I think so.
Yeah. Like I'm definitely not like a big planner. Like when I moved out, it was just because things got so bad that I just like packed up and moved to Sydney, which I don't advise. Like I'm not telling
So everybody I'll meet you at the airport.
Yeah, everyone be like me. No, don't. But when I did that, like,
but isn't that like such a good point in the sense like literally even if you have no savings.
I had no savings.
I think that's like where I'm at right now. I have no savings, but I'm at the point where I'm happy to live paycheck to paycheck and just get the fuck out of home, because I feel like it's affecting me and my productivity in life.
Yeah.
It's just very heavy being at home where it's just too much.
Yeah. And what you'll find, I think, is that as soon as you move out and you create that distance, like your relationship with your parents, it just gets better.
Everyone says
it
that.
does.
Every single person. I've never met anybody that's moved out of home and has said that their relationship with their parents hasn't flourished. I think you get to see the good in them as opposed to the like typical nagging parents.
Yeah, because they're not like looking over your shoulder all the time. It's just, it becomes a lot easier because you have that distance, which I think is really healthy. Yeah. But obviously, it depends how old you are. If you're 18, it might not be the best idea. But also, like even just moving out for a short time and then moving back home, I think... I haven't done that myself, but I think you would still see a change because like we said before, they've then accepted that like you don't actually need them. Like you can be independent. So once they've seen that, I think there's a little bit of a shift in the way that they'll treat you. They'll probably treat you more like an adult.
Yeah.
And like because they haven't had control over what you're doing for, like say if you moved out for a year, like then I don't think, it depends on, obviously.
I think the dynamic will change forever once you move out. I think they will see you as, like you said, like as an adult.
Yeah, because they're not going to be, depends on the parents. Some might dive straight back into being like super overbearing. True. But for the most part, I think they'll see that, they'll see you as an adult and they'll see that they didn't need to control everything that you did in order for you to be living, a happy, healthy life. And they'll probably be a little bit more easygoing. But
agreed.
Yeah. We had a few questions about parents being really strict on partners. So how to deal with conservative Asian parents who don't let their daughters stay over at their boyfriend's house.
It said straight at me.
How would you deal with that?
I just went really close, sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, I had this issue with my last partner because that was my first time ever bringing someone home. And so there was heaps of pushback for so long. And I was getting so much pressure from my ex as well. So it's like pressure on both ends. Like his pressure was like, you just need to learn to, what I was saying before, like pressure your parents to realize that it's okay.
Yeah.
So then I was getting pressure from there, and then I was getting pressure from myself for like trying to push back on my own parents, like in my own way.
Yeah.
And just like so much pressure, Jesus.
Yeah, and I feel like boys always have it a bit easier in
They
that
do,
regard.
and
Like
so
their
I think-
parents, it's so much easier.
Yeah, and I just don't think he kind of understood that, which is fine. Like obviously we're in very different situations. And he didn't live with his parents. So then he didn't get that like...
So did you stay over at his house?
No, but the funny thing is he lived with his grandmother at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So then there was a bit of pushback from his grandmother as well. But then I think we were both... Yeah, it was really weird now that I think about it. I was getting pressured, but then
he
was always a... Yeah. Anyway.
Whatever.
Anyway. Whatever. So then what we did was like test the waters. This is what I always say. Bit by bit, you push it because your parents realize that you're going to be alive no matter what. You're going to be fine.
Yeah.
So then with his grandmother, I stayed over one night. And then from then on, like I got to stay over.
And did you tell your parents where you were staying?
No.
Yeah.
I always used to say like I'm going to a friend's house and sleeping over. I'm going to one of the girls' places.
Yeah, did you have like one particular
over.
friend that you just slept over at their house all the time?
Yeah, all the time.
In
It's one
quotation
person.
marks?
Your friends, your mum, no, your parents always have one friend that they trust and love, and you just always just palm it off to them.
I did that too.
And so when he stayed over at mine, he always had to go home. It was like 1:00. My mum would come knocking on the door and be like, okay, it's getting late now. And it was what a buzzkill.
Yeah.
Like you guys are like spooning or whatever. It's just this knocking on the door every single time.
I'm having flashbacks to like my early relationships too.
Literally. And so one time, so we pushed it even more. So he would stay till like 3 or 4 a.m. Because one time we were like fucking exhausted. He was
I
like,
thought you were going to say something else.
sorry, I shouldn't have. Oh god, I didn't word that right. I probably should have dropped the F-bomb in there. Could have gone in a different direction. Anyway.
So you were exhausted.
So we were exhausted.
Yeah.
And it was 3 or 4 a.m. and I think my mum was like knocking on the door. And so then he had to leave. Like, we're both like walking. I was walking him out. I was like dying inside because I was so tired.
Yeah. You're like, sorry.
And so then we pushed it to 3 or 4. And then the next time he stayed till the morning.
Oh, till the morning.
And then he had to leave really early in the morning. So we had to get him out before my dad saw him.
Oh, so it was your dad that was a bit stricter?
Yeah, but I feel like my mum was just as strict, but she didn't want to like be the bad guy. So she would blame it on my dad.
Good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
Yep.
I feel like it just kept going back both ways.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then after that we pushed it more and then more, but you kind of get the gist. And so eventually at some point you just got to stay over all the time. So it didn't matter. Like, that's the thing. But it also depends. Like, it's funny because my parents are strict, but then they cave in really easily. So maybe they're not as traditional as some other parents, because I know a lot of friends that would never cross their parents.
Yeah, which is so insane to me.
It blows my mind.
I'm like,
I just could
never...
never...
how do you keep your mouth shut? I could not.
Me too. And I think maybe that's another thing. I think some people are super, 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 super respectful of their parents. I think I'm kind of somewhere in the middle where I do respect them, but I do have a voice.
I'm definitely
in our
on
relationship.
The other end.
Yeah, like I will say my words. Like I will say my piece kind of thing. So I think it was... Yeah.
Wait, so how do they normally take it? Like, if you were to express, like, your feelings to them about something and be, like, try to put your foot down, like, in a conversation with them, how do they respond? Like, do they get angry or do they just ignore you or?
They just give me, like... I feel like I've gotten to a point where I'm very vocal with my parents. Like, there's just been so much pushback. So it's easy for me to say stuff now. But, like... Yeah, I feel like maybe I'm more past that point than I thought. Because I think in the beginning I was like, I'm still trying to navigate it, but I'm like way past the point of like keeping my mouth shut. Yeah. Like if I don't like something, I'll say it.
Speak up.
I won't even like try to sugarcoat it. I won't beat around the bush. And I completely understand that that's not the dynamic for everyone. I've seen like people speak to their parents. I'm like, fuck, you are respectful. I could never.
Which I don't know, like maybe it is a good thing to be like more respectful to your parents, but I just feel like if they're not being respectful of like you and your autonomy as a person, by the time you're like in your mid to late 20s, like by this stage in life, like how long are you going to let that go on for?
Yeah.
Like, and if it's making you miserable, like if you feel like you're missing out on opportunities and like just not getting to live your life because your parents just like, because you're not willing to push back against your parents, like I think I don't know.
I feel like you've got to decide for yourself. Is this all worth it? Is this affecting you? And you know what? If your answer is no, and I know a lot of people that have dated for 10 years and they don't go over to each other's home.
Oh my God, that's insane.
And their partners, like their parents don't know their partners exist.
Oh my God.
And if you are happy to lead that life and you don't feel like it's affecting you, go for it. I just feel like that would just drive me insane.
Do you think they actually don't know, or do you think they just turn a blind eye? Because I feel like a lot of Asian parents turn a blind eye.
Yeah, I do think that.
Actually, probably just a lot of parents in general, but I've noticed it a lot more so with like my Asian friends' parents, where they pretend that they don't know what's going on.
Yep.
But like, really,
they've
clocked it. They just don't want to. They don't want to deal with the awkward conversation, or like they just don't want to deal with it.
So if you have conservative parents who don't let if your parents don't let your boyfriend come over, like, I don't know, I've just always pushed back. I know that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but you just have to decide at the end of the day, like, not decide, but you just have to...
like, evaluate, like, what's more important to you. Oh. Whoops, the days.
So then, I guess, like, talking about, like, pushing boundaries with partners and letting your parents... like feel comfortable with you having a partner kind of leads us to the next question of how do you deal with moving out with a partner, but your parents expect no pre-marital sex.
I feel like that surely just turning a blind eye at that stage. Like well,
okay. Can we like confirm what does this question mean? So this question is asking your parents are okay with you moving out with your partner, but want you to not have sex with your partner.
Or maybe they mean like how to, like they want to move out with their partner, but their parents don't want them to because they'll have premarital sex.
Okay. Maybe we'll answer it like that. Yeah, okay. It doesn't make sense because it's like, if you're moving out with your partner,
surely by then they've, like that ship has sailed.
They know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Look, it's tricky. It's the same thing though. I feel like you have to push back. Also, I think something we didn't really cover with the last question is like getting your parents comfortable with your partner, because it's that whole unknown thing again, right? Like they're just scared that like especially if they don't know the partner, like that's going to be so much worse for them. So if you can get your partner to gain their respect and get them more comfortable with them, I think it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah, true. It will be.
Yeah.
I think they just fear. Yeah, I think it's all down to the unknown, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess this kind of leads to everything else we're going to talk about soon, but I just feel like ultimately all the questions that we've covered, it's like I've learnt to realise that I am my own person. Like, I just can't keep living by someone else's rules. Like, you're going to go fucking crazy. And some people, have the ability to tolerate this their entire life. I know so many like grown adults that like respect every single rule their parents make, but not everyone's going to be the same. And I don't think I've ever been like that. I've just always pushed back on things that I think would ultimately make me more happy. Yeah. And they have proven me time and time again that I've been much happier by pushing back on their rules. Yeah. Because like the stuff I'm asking for is not ridiculous. It's just like basic freedom, basic privacy, basic independence.
And they always come around in the end, right?
Always. Like, if you're still alive, like, what are they going to argue about? So that's why I just think, like, you need to decide what's important to you. And you need to decide how much these things are affecting you. Because what's the point in not moving out with your partner if you being at home with your parents and, like, just constantly wishing you were out with your partner, like, moving out with your partner and having your own life. Like, I don't know. I just think, like... I feel like, am I just being disrespectful?
I don't know, because,
it's so hard to say, because I know so many people that, like, would never, ever, ever do any of the stuff that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I do too, and, like, to me, that's just always seems so crazy, because
that seems crazy to me too. Yeah, 100%.
I don't know, but I think it comes down to like a personality thing too.
And at the end of the day, right, you and I, we're just explaining our point of view. We're not even giving advice. So that's just my point of view. Get out table.
Sorry. We're like, get out there and disrespect your parents.
Disrespect your parents.
Go against all their wishes. No.
They said come home at 10, fucking come home at 2 a.m.
I think, like, compromise too. You can do these things and still compromise. And like, circling back to what I said before, like your parents actually might surprise you sometimes if you do, like, there are ways to do it respectfully, and like I feel like they're unlikely to open that communication channel because, like, for starters, like if they're from a culture where like communication about like feelings and things is not a big thing, I think that's just not something that will come naturally to them, and it probably comes more naturally to us as a generation. Like they just might surprise you if you were to just have a conversation with them. But if that fails, like sometimes you do just need to push back a bit. How many times have we said push back?
Push back.
Push back.
This whole thing is just push back.
Yeah.
Don't take shit.
Yeah.
I'm going to hell for this podcast. Fuck.
We were already going to hell.
Yeah, also. I already have a seat saved for me. It's fine.
Right next to mine. All right, we'll move on to a question kind of in the same theme. So this is a friend of mine. She's...
You'd like to give some context to her situation?
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of context. So she's been engaged to her partner for, I think, like 5 years. They basically live together already. And her parents want them to have like a big traditional wedding, but that's not something that she wants to do. So she said she's willing to have the wedding just to do things the right way. Maybe due to like Catholic and Asian guilt. But the thought of having the big wedding makes her feel sick and miserable. So she's asking, how can I balance tradition and honouring what they want? I want to make them happy, but not at the cost of my own mental health. So it's tough.
Yeah. I think as someone that does a lot of brides, I get to see this a lot. Mm-hmm. You see the dynamic of why people are doing such or having such grand weddings and why people choose certain details for the weddings, and ultimately it comes down to my parents wanted it.
Yeah.
Why do I have 350 people at my wedding? Half of those people are my parents' friends.
Yeah, like they don't even know the people at their own wedding.
Why am I doing the tea ceremony for my parents? And obviously some people do tea ceremony, like traditional tea ceremonies for themselves, but I've obviously had some people that say they don't even give a shit, but for the parents. So,
yeah, I think
can you bring up her question again?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I think this might be a situation where like you have to compromise a little bit.
I know a few people that have had really big weddings for their parents. And I just think like a wedding, and this is what I've learnt doing a lot of bridal makeup. I've just seen a lot of like different dynamics and situations, but I just think a friend recently said to me like, there is a life after a wedding. A wedding is one day. It's a party. If someone gets upset over it, I just can't imagine like why. It's literally one day. And obviously everyone has different values. And I think I guess with Asian parents, there's so much emphasis on the wedding. It's like it's the be all and end all. It's like the biggest thing, biggest day of your life. Yeah. But I think now that we're in such a modern society, we're starting to realize like people are fucking eloping, not even getting married, having kids without being, you know, married or whatever. So it's like so flexible, it's so open, so easy. So weddings aren't as big of a deal to us anymore. Like even growing up, I thought weddings were like amazing, and now I just couldn't care less.
I know. I feel like that's us just becoming jaded from like working in that industry and seeing how superficial it all is.
And it's so like, and not to shade my brides or anything. I've seen some incredibly happy couples and stuff, but I just think like sometimes the details, sometimes I've noticed that the details aren't even for them, and I've noticed that they just do it for their friends or just do it to one up the next person. And I just think the actual reason why people get married gets lost. And I think sometimes when you start to fulfill all of your parents' wishes and needs, you're kind of missing the point. Like, and I always say this to brides when they get nervous or like whatever, like a bit anxious before the day, which is so natural. I say, just don't forget, like it's about you and your husband. That's all it's about. Tomorrow, it's just about you and your husband. Like, don't be nervous. Don't feel anxious, whatever. Like, when you guys walk down the aisle and you sign those papers, it's literally about you two. It's got nothing to do with anyone else. And when you wake up tomorrow, you'll realise, like, it's just you two.
Yeah. Like, you're like, it's about the marriage, like, not about
100%
the wedding. But yeah, I think if your parents are, like, if that's something that your parents are really adamant about, like, it could be worth trying to find, like, a middle ground there somewhere. Like, you don't have to have a huge wedding, but if they still want you to have a wedding, or if there's, like, religious reasons why you know, your parents might expect you to be married and you want to respect that and you want to make them happy, just find a way to do that, striking a good, like, balance or a good compromise. And also at the moment, I feel, well, COVID restrictions have kind of lifted, but I was going to say COVID is a great excuse for, like, not inviting people that you don't want to invite.
It was a very good excuse.
Yeah.
I feel like there's two camps of brides that I've seen. Like the camp where my parents wanted all this stuff, but I said no. So then I had a smaller wedding. I had my wedding my way. And they've been very happy with it.
Yeah.
So they've put their foot down. But then I've seen the camp where there's actually three. So my way, cave into their parents' wants. That's the middle. And then there's the other camp where it's like they've also realised that the wedding is just about them getting married at the end of the day. And if their parents want fucking 500 people there, you can have it. That's what I've realised as well. That's another camp of people.
Yeah.
You can have whatever you want, whatever friends you want, whatever details you want. You can have it because at the end of the day, like, it's about my marriage. And this is just a party and I don't care. So if you want to do all the frills and whatever, you can have it.
Yeah.
So I think you have to go into this wedding situation with the mindset of realising and focusing on what it's actually really all about.
Yeah.
So it's a different approach, I guess.
Yeah, like, you just kind of do it, but, like, I don't know, hang on, I'm just trying to, like, wrap my head around this, because it's not like you have to, like, you don't have to be that thrilled about it, like, to just go through with it, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either. But I think, let's just say I was in your friend's situation, in the context of my parents, and they wanted all these things. For me, I think by now you would have gotten the idea I push back.
Yeah.
I would just say, it's my way. I went this way, this way, this way, this way. I feel like there's probably some point where you can meet a happy medium.
Yeah, especially if it is, like, the Catholic guilt thing. Like, you can still get married, but just do it your way.
Yeah.
And then you've kind of, like, covered all your bases. But like, done it your way.
I think there's so many ways to approach this. Like, you can push back, you can just cave in and just realise that it's just a freaking wedding at the end of the day. It's not a big deal.
Especially if they're paying for it.
Yeah, that's another big thing. If your parents are paying for it, you have
just
no say.
them,
You literally have no say.
Oh, yeah.
So
tricky.
it just depends on what you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting one. It's actually really hard.
Yeah.
Because weddings are such a big deal to some people. And I can imagine why, because at some point I used to think weddings were such a big deal until I started working in the industry. You just realise it's just a big party.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't even know if we've answered that, but I don't know. Do
you want to open the thing again? I just want to see if I've answered the actual question. Well, she said that the thought of having a big wedding makes her sick. I feel like if it's going to make you sick, she said, makes me sick and miserable. If it's going to make you sick and miserable, do things your way.
Did I not read that part?
I don't know. This is intense. Like, this is a little bit more serious than I thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah, so do things your way.
Yeah, literally do things your way.
Yeah.
Just do things your way. It's totally fine.
If I were in her shoes, I would just have a small wedding, like, elope, get married, but not do the whole huge wedding thing, because, I don't know, if it's making you anxious, you're probably not going to enjoy it.
For sure. It's so stressful leading up to it. And again, like I said, it's just about you and your partner. You do your thing. And at the cost of my own mental health, I feel like we skipped them.
I think I read that.
Okay, did you?
I think so. All right, well, we hope that was somewhat helpful. All right, so moving on to a kind of different set of questions. I don't even know how to...
Maybe we'll move on to this. I feel like we've already answered boundaries.
Yeah, okay. All right.
To read it?
Yeah.
So the next question is, how do you balance trying to navigate a healthier relationship with your parents versus holding on to the pain from trauma from the past? This is
Fuck.
yeah, literally the situation I'm in right now.
Same.
I feel like in the past few years, like, I've realized, okay, I really want to get to a better place with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
But holy shit, like, letting go of what they've done, or like what I feel like they've done in the past, is so hard.
And also,
so hard.
I feel like as you get older, or like as more time passes, you start looking back and just realizing more and more things that caused you trauma. Like things that you thought were normal at the time. And I'll just have a flashback and I'm like, what the fuck?
No, seriously.
That was not okay.
Oh my God, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
It's hard. I'm going to say one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Go to therapy.
Yeah.
Go to therapy. Like, some of this shit is so hard to navigate and dissect yourself. Like, you can't even see the dynamic. Like, it's...
Mm-hmm.
And especially if your parents are ethnic, they will always, like, gaslight you into thinking that they were doing their best and putting you first, or they did it out of love, when in fact, sometimes things they do... Not always. Oh, it probably is out of love, but they'll gaslight you into thinking that it was the right thing.
That it was okay, yeah.
But when you go to therapy, you realise, like, how many things they did were wrong.
Yeah. Not even just going to therapy. It's just when I started talking to other people, because I had always told people that, yeah, I have a rough relationship with my mum, and I was always really vague about it. And then when I started telling people, like, actual stories of things that had happened or things she'd said to me, and just seeing their reactions, like the shock. I was like... oh shit.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, because I always thought it was normal, or like somewhat normal, like, oh, when a parent gets mad at you, they do X, Y, Z, but it's kind of like they might do X, but they're not doing Y and Z.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So I'm actually planning on going to therapy soon for this.
I did go to therapy for a bit to dissect some of this, but I need to go back because there's so much to unpack.
Oh yeah, I feel like it's kind of a lifelong journey to unpacking your like childhood trauma.
Oh God, yeah. If it's heavy, it takes a while.
Yeah.
But highly recommend therapy, because I just think we don't have the tools to like navigate this shit by ourselves, because it's very like the way you dissect things will always be from one perspective, but a therapist will always help you see the 360 of it.
Yeah. And I think that also comes from like the dynamic of having one parent, one child. Because if you have siblings around, I feel like that breaks up the dynamic in a way where they can stick up for you, or like they can speak up for you if, you know, your parents are really in the wrong. And even like with having two parents, like they can call each other out. I mean, I'm not saying that they always do, but it just breaks things up a bit. Like there's always more perspectives in play. Whereas if it's just like parent and child only,
so intense, like the spotlight is literally on you.
Yeah, and like a lot of the time parents like don't want to hear that they're wrong from their child.
Yeah.
Because they think like, what do you know? You're just a child. I'm the adult, you know. But yeah, I think definitely having like an outside perspective really helps you like unravel all those things and figure out also how you're bringing that forward into your other relationships. Because I definitely took a lot of like the trauma from my upbringing into my personal relationships, and as I get older I'm kind of realizing like that I was repeating patterns that I don't want to repeat. So
same.
Yeah, and I've like kind of done all that learning by myself, but I probably would have got there a lot quicker if I had a therapist to talk it through with.
Yeah.
But I guess in terms of like,
if you didn't have a therapist.
Yeah. Well, the way I see it, and this kind of applies to all relationships that have become toxic, I think you kind of have three options. You can either cut them off. Actually, let me backtrack. So the first option...
Cancelled.
No, okay. So the way I see it, I think you have three options. You can either do your best to forgive them, but if you choose to forgive them, you can't just keep holding those things over their head.
Yeah.
So if
that's not forgiving.
That's not forgiving, yeah. If you're forgiving them, you have to really like be able to let it go and then move forward, like if that's what you're trying to do.
Fresh start.
Yeah. The other option, I think we kind of discussed this last time, is if it's things that you don't think you're able to work through with them, but things that they're not willing to change, sometimes you have to pick and choose what you're willing to sweep under the rug and just like let it go.
Because you need to realise your parents are just fully formed people.
Yeah, they're stubborn. Like,
if we're talking about ethnic parents, like, do you really think they're going to go to therapy?
Yeah.
Like, that's why you kind of just have to take what you can get and just accept.
Yeah. Like
things.
Yeah, like sometimes you just have to choose. Like, there are some things that they might be willing to kind of like bend on a little bit or like learn or improve, but there are some things that they're just never going to budge on. And if those things are things that you think you can kind of be okay with, like not let it get to you, or things that you can just topics you can try to avoid with them, like sidestep a little bit just for the sake of being civil, you can do that. And then I think your third option is if those are things that you can't get past, or if it's like it's just really unhealthy, you just have to cut them off. Like,
or just move out.
Yeah, just create distance. Sorry, not cut them off. Yeah,
cut
them off. See you later.
Never call me again, please.
Yeah, but like, you can't keep holding those things over their head, or like, because they also, like, if you think of it from their perspective, it's.
But I feel like holding on to the pain is not telling your parents how much they've hurt you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I feel like, and that's me, I guess, like, I've never told my parents, like, how much those 10 years hurt me.
See, I've tried, and it always ends in this, like, circular argument of, like my mum would be like, she did her best, but I was so difficult. And then I'll be like, yeah, I was difficult, but I was a child.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of becomes like, because I'll be like, you treated me like this, and she'll be like, yeah, but that's because you were treating me like that.
Just back and forth.
Yeah. Which I probably was. Like, I was a terror when I was a teenager. Like, she had a really tough job, but I always in my mind go back to the fact that, like, I was a child whose needs weren't being met. And like, from my perspective as an adult now, I feel like she should have been able to see that, but she just never saw it that way, or maybe it just didn't click for her like that. So it's tough. Like,
it's really hard.
Yeah.
But it is like that heavy weight of, and I still feel it today, like that heavy weight of just resentment and just being pissed, but it's torn between just wanting to finally just have a healthy relationship, is just not being able to really be seen and like have your parents see how much they've impacted you in a bad way.
Yeah, and I think it's also really hard for them, like, if you do speak up and you do tell them, like, how much they hurt you, like, they don't, like, no one wants to hear it. Like, you would feel horrible hearing that from someone else. So I think sometimes it's really hard for them to accept that, especially if they thought that they were doing their best. So
it's hard. I think it's a hard pill to swallow for them. 100%.
Yeah, it would be. Like,
imagine just being told, you fucking did a shit job.
Yeah, probably the biggest thing you'll ever do in your life is being a parent.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought about it like that. It's very
insightful. Totally. I think about this a lot. What
did my mum say to me when I told her, this wasn't even about her actually. Like, I was telling her, like, I was having such a hard time last year, and I said to her, like, this is when we would just argue about dumb stuff. I'm like, you're just like stressing me the fuck out. Like, I'm going through so much stuff.
Yeah.
And
you're not helping.
Yeah, you're not helping. I'm like, I have to go see a therapist. Like, this is too much for me. And she was like, everybody's stressed. Like, I was like, you did not just say that. She was like, you know.
Made me so angry.
Yeah. Do you know what I'm dealing with? Like, that's the shit I'm dealing with. Like, everybody's stressed, everybody's angry. Like, you're not the only one. I'm just like, fuck.
I've heard that exact response.
Yeah. On the exact same day, I had to go tell my therapist. I'm like, can you believe
this?
And he was just like, silent. I was like, yeah, that's just what I'm dealing with. It's not the worst thing someone could say. No. But that just goes to show you how, like, Asian parents have very little emotional intelligence and have so little capability of knowing how to handle you emotionally. Yeah.
And I think also part of like dealing with the pain that your parents have caused you, I think it really helps just to think of it in the perspective that, like, that in most cases they weren't doing that to you or because of you. It's just because they didn't know how to deal with it better. Like,
totally.
They have a totally different perspective and different set of values, and they had a totally different upbringing, different culture, everything that's just made it really, like, made the way that they would deal with things so different to how maybe we would. So just try to keep it in your mind that it wasn't personal. I feel like that helps it hurt a little bit less.
You're healing me right now.
Look at me, I should be a therapist.
But it's so true, because it's like what I said in the last podcast. We always think our parents are perfect, but then you forget that they're just their own person. Like, maybe in a time where we would be the same age, like, would we really be friends? Like, as in, like...
Yes, I think about that too. Whenever I meet, like, or whenever I think about older family members, like aunties, uncles, or, like, when I meet adults in their, like, 40s and 50s, I think, like, would we have been friends when we were both 25?
Exactly.
And, like, if, like, that's a lot of it, I think, too, with my mum, is that we are such different personalities. Like, you could not have two more different people. That's so, there's friction. We clash
100%.
as people, but you're forced to have a relationship because you're family.
100%. There you go. And that's why, I think that takes the load off of your shoulders as well, because like, it's like the movies where like parents like, and their kids like best friends, but it's like the second you take that pressure off of yourself to have that perfect relationship, maybe you'll just see your parents for who they are and what their personality traits are, like they're stubborn, this, that, blah, 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 and you'll be able to navigate it instead of constantly wondering why are they pushing back so much, why are they doing this. It's just like you actually accept them for who they are and you decide where you want to go from there. Yeah,
like think about it as like that random friend of a friend that sometimes comes along to your gatherings and you're not a big fan of them, but you're forced to spend time together, so you just be civil with them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that can be a good way to approach it if you're having 100%. A lot of friction. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my stomach.
Okay, so now we're just going to move on to some questions that are a little bit more related to moving out. A couple of them were kind of, I'd say, not really relevant to what we discussed in this podcast, so I'll probably go answer them over on Instagram. But do you want to read out?
I'll read out the first one. Yeah. So this person said, I constantly feel some type of shame for renting and not buying my own property. Do you guys feel the pressure, and how do you deal with simply justifying renting versus buying?
Yeah, I think this is a really big thing when you like hit your mid to late 20s and you see everyone around you suddenly seems to be building houses and buying houses. Yeah, I think
literally everyone.
Yeah,
there isn't a single person I know that's like, maybe 90% of the people I know are about to put a deposit down or have already bought a place or something.
Yeah, I feel like that's also like an Asian thing or like maybe a more ethnic thing, whereas white people tend to move out into like share houses when they're young.
So true.
It's like more the vibe. Yeah. But I think it's just really important to keep in mind that like everyone's circumstances are different. Being able to buy a house is a privilege. So not everyone will be able to save up for a deposit. And even if you can, not everyone would have someone that can like sign on as a guarantor on their home loan, or like, help them out with their loan or whatever it might be. So don't like beat yourself up by comparing yourself to other people and their circumstances, because it's different for everyone.
I think people I feel like people have been conditioned to think that the only way to be happy and successful in life is to own a home. And I don't think that is true in any way, shape or form. It's like where you place, like at the end of the day, it's like where do you place your, like where do your values lie? Like as in, does that make sense? As in like,
is that something you actually want to do, or do you just want to do it because
correct, you're just ticking it off.
Yeah.
Like do you think that, you need to ask yourself, do you really think buying that home and having a mortgage of that size is going to make you happy? And if it does, and you think that that is like the biggest goal in your life, then absolutely tick it off, because for most of these people, yes, that's all they've ever wanted. And for a lot of people, you don't even know, maybe they're struggling to even pay their mortgage, or maybe they even just jumped the gun and got the property, not even in a place that they liked or even the home that they liked, just because their parents were pressuring them to buy a home, or maybe because they felt like everyone else was buying a home around them. Like you don't really know the story.
Yeah, like people are just kind of ticking boxes sometimes, like, without actually...
Yeah, like everyone's just posting that sold sign, but do you really know what's going on behind the scenes? Like no one really knows. I think people keep glamorizing fucking buying a house.
Yeah, having a lifelong debt.
Yeah, because essentially that's what it is. We're not all going to be lucky enough, and this is just being realistic, we're not all going to be lucky enough to be able to pay off our mortgage within 15 or 20 years. Most of us are stuck with it forever. Yeah. So the glamour of buying a home, I kind of feel like the curtain needs to be pulled away, because it's a big, big deal, and there shouldn't be pressure on other people or shame on people wanting to rent. And like, can we just be realistic about the home market right now? Housing market, it's pretty fucked up.
It is pretty fucked up. Yeah. So I also think I've read articles of people that are like saying that they don't ever want to buy a house and they think renting is the go forever.
Because you can move around and do whatever you want.
Can move around, because if you buy a house, you're really like setting, like you're set in stone for living in that area. Like how do people choose the suburb they want to live in? I have like 10 suburbs I want to try living in, like off the top of my head. That could also just be my personality, where I like a bit of change.
I wouldn't mind moving around, to be honest with you. And like what's the point in pressuring yourself into buying a home if you know you want to be a jet setter, you want to work abroad, live abroad, whatever. I don't know, I just feel like you've got to evaluate
Yeah.
what your values are, what your life goals are. If you think you want to have the white picket fence, like, of course you better start working for that goal.
Yeah.
But if you don't really even feel like you want that white picket fence in the suburbs of your dreams or whatever, and you want to move around, like, what's the point in pining for that dream?
Yeah, exactly. Like, renting is 100% a viable option.
Oh, totally.
Also, if it's like...
It's because we've grown up being taught renting is a waste of money. But I don't know if it is, because at the end of the day, like, renting isn't a waste of money if you get, say, if you're in a shitty situation at home and you get the freedom and you get the peace of mind and being in your own space. I feel like that's priceless.
Yeah, 100%. I was about to say that. Like, you always hear, like, renting's dead money, like, you're paying off someone else's mortgage. And, yeah, you kind of are. Like, but if you're not in a position to save up for the deposit for the house, like, then that's fine. You're, like, I think you have to shift your mindset from, like, I'm paying this money that could be going towards a mortgage to, like, I'm paying for my peace.
100%. And the second you start thinking like that, I feel like it's not even a waste of money at all.
No.
Because at the end of the day, we all value our money differently, right? Why do some people buy designer purses? It just sits there on the shelf, but they see it as the biggest asset in their life. It's just I don't know if that's even a good analogy. It's in, like, at the end of the day, we use our money to buy into the lifestyle that we want.
Yeah. Yeah, and if renting's something that seems like a better option to you in your circumstances, then, like, by all means do it. Like, you shouldn't have to feel bad about it.
For sure. You just have to decide what lifestyle you want and just stick with it. As in, like, don't feel guilty or embarrassed or shameful just because your friends are buying homes and stuff. And if your friends make you feel embarrassed or pressure you, like, do you really want to be
what
friends?
What kind of friends are they? Yeah.
Like, surely not. Like,
like, everyone is on their own path. You definitely shouldn't have to feel guilty about that. I
think when you start looking around, you get really... I think I've felt that for sure. That's not to say I've never felt the pressure. I still look around and think, like, fuck, what am I doing? Freelancing and, like, income isn't consistent. But then, like, I realise I'm pretty happy because, like, I just have the most flexible schedule.
Yes.
And life is good and I can get by. And I think when you stop looking at everybody else's and you show some gratitude for the life that you have, it's less stressful. But when you start fucking looking around, holy shit, it's so overwhelming.
Oh, yeah. It's like that whole comparison is the thief of joy thing.
Oh, my God,
it's
100%.
so true. But, like, other people could be looking at aspects of your life and wishing, like, that their life was more like yours. But, like, you never really know.
The grass is never greener. I have clients saying to me all the time, like, oh, my God, I wish... Don't you just love what you do? Like, you just work on weekends and you have every single day free. I'm like, yes. It's, like, amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I love it.
I love it.
Yeah.
So it's like... I don't know. Everyone's just going to always want the other person's life, the good parts of the other person's life without realising, you know, there's always the tough bits.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Next question.
Oh, I guess this is very similar, right? So it says, how do you deal with the pressure of moving out? Really don't want to, but everyone else is.
Yeah, same thing, I think. But with that, I would also kind of question, like, why is it that you don't want to move out? Is it because, like, you're so comfortable, like, being taken care of by your parents at home? Like, are your parents babying you? Because if they are, sometimes I think it can be good to, like, just get out there and, like, gain a little bit of independence from moving out. But if it's like you just feel like you should because everyone else is doing it, then I think, like, you definitely don't need to feel bad about that.
Totally. Because I feel like, in what world would you want to leave when everything is paid for? Your parents, like, coddle you, like, cook, whatever. Like, obviously you want to know how to do those things, but I just can't imagine a scenario where, like, my home life is so good, my parents don't pester me for, you know, what do the white people call it? Board? Is that what it's called?
Board, where you pay board, yeah.
Yeah, where you pay...
Paying your parents money to live at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paying board, and, like, your parents don't pester you to leave, which is the case with I don't know if this person's Asian, I'm assuming they're not, but I'm going to speak on the Asian side of things. Yeah. It's in, like, where they don't pester you.
Guy too.
Yeah. Pester you to leave. Like, why would you leave? Like, why would you even feel guilty? I'd be laughing at anybody else who, maybe not laughing, that's a bit mean, but, like,
we're laughing at all of you.
But it's like, I would feel bad for the person that got pushed out by their parents when they weren't even ready.
Yeah. But it builds character.
I have no doubt about that.
Yeah. I think, what was I going to say? Fuck, I keep losing my train of thought.
I just think if you don't want to move out, don't move out. Like, don't worry about everyone else, seriously, because there's so many perks to being at home. The only time I would say move out of home is if it's really affecting your mental health. Yeah. But in every other scenario, I'm just like, why would you do that for?
Yeah, 100%. I think if you've got it like pretty good at home and it's a healthy environment and you're saving money, like 100% do that. I always tell people, like, when I have like younger clients and they're thinking about moving out, I'm like, if things are good at home, like, just stay as long as you can, save your money. But if that's not an option for you, then 100% by all means,
bounce,
get out of there. But yeah, you shouldn't have to feel bad about making either decision, whichever one that is.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Paul Schultz.
Yeah. Have we covered pretty much everything?
Yeah.
I think we have. All right. Yeah, we'll just wrap it up here. If you guys have any follow-up questions or any other input, you can contact us over on the podcast Instagram, which is twobestiesonebraincell, or Michelle's Instagram.
GucciPaints.
GucciPaints.
Paints.
Not pants.
Not pants.
I'll leave all that in the description box below. And yeah, otherwise it's pretty much it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast again.
Thank you for having me. I hope someone related to this.
Yeah, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Hopefully we weren't just rambling. I hope we made like some sort of sense. Yeah.
I feel like everything kind of related to one another, so I feel like we didn't really have much structure.
Yeah.
It's all interconnected.
It's all like a big mind map.
Main takeaway, push back.
Push back, exactly. Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much for listening, guys. Bye.
Bye.